I remember once when in London eating out at a macrobiotic restaurant near the East End. The meal, I think, largely consisted of unpolished rice and organic fruit and vegetables, but the thing that stuck in my mind was the incredible range of people sat down at the trestle tables to eat their dinner. There were religious people for whom food cooked this way didn't violate any of their religious laws. Jews, Muslims, Sikhs, Buddhists all sat down to eat together. Along from them were yuppies. It was the 1980s, and young, upwardly mobile people were in the ascendant. They came because the restaurant was trendy, and because there was ample parking for their Porsche or Golf GTI. There were students, such as myself, for whom the meal was excellent value, as well as providing you with some much-needed vitamins and nutrients that were sadly missing from the usual student diet. There were born-again hippies who had brought into the Zen philosophy, and back in the days when organic veg was hard to come by, were wanting to break new ground. The religious, the good, the rich, the poor, and the slightly odd all sat down, shoulder to shoulder on the hard wooden benches, and ate their meals together. One reason that meal stuck in my mind is that I have this unshakable belief that that is how the church should be. Not monochrome, not just appealing to one particular type of person or culture, but gloriously mixed. Somewhere where the religious, the good, the rich, the poor, and the slightly odd can all sit down shoulder to shoulder on hard wooden benches and be united in a common purpose. That's what the church should be like. Although I'm kind of ambivalent about the hard wooden benches. Today's gospel reading features two people who represent a fairly broad section of humanity. But each one responds to Jesus. Each one receives Jesus' mercy, and together both of them reflect something of what the church should be. The first was Jairus, a leader in the synagogue. Jairus, although essentially good, is unlikely to have been a supporter of Jesus. He was part of the religious elite, so often the target of Jesus' harsh criticism. He was a powerful man, a man held in high esteem, and Jesus would have posed a threat to that power and esteem. Jairus would probably have seen Jesus as a bit of a troublemaker, going around forgiving sins and violating the laws relating to the Sabbath, hanging around with a bunch of gluttons and drunkards, and inciting the crowds to riot. But Jairus' daughter was dying, his only daughter, and she was at last of marriageable age. Jairus was desperate, and in his desperation he turned to Jesus. And Jesus answered his plea for help. He fought his way through the crowds, with them all making demands upon him, and he came to the young girl who now lay dead. But Jesus brought the daughter back to life. Jesus thinks nothing of personal gain or of private resentment. He neither wants Jairus to pull strings for him nor to publicly announce support for him. He actually wants to keep it all low-key. He's responded to a need, and that's that. But on his way to Jairus' house, Jesus met a woman who also needed his help. The gospel accounts of this almost put it as a comical scene. Jesus is fighting through the crowds. He's surrounded by people pressing in on every side. And suddenly he stops and he says, "Who touched me?" "Who touched you?" says Peter. "Nobody is socially distancing. You want to know who touched you? There are people all around. They're all touching you. How can you ask who touched you?" Of course, by now everything's stopped. People are interested in what's going on. An atmosphere of suspense has built up. "I know someone touched me," Jesus says, "because I felt the power go out of me." Eyes would glance around those who'd gathered. Who was it who touched him? And why did they touch him? Suddenly a pale, ill-looking woman edges towards Jesus to take centre stage. Trembling, she falls at Jesus' feet. She had touched him. She had touched him because for 12 years she had been bleeding uncontrollably. For 12 years she'd lived the life of a recluse, unable to mix with anyone because her bleeding made her ritually unclean. Without a friend, without love, rejected by the healthy and the pure, forced to live alone and all the time weakened and near death because of her bleeding. She had to touch Jesus. She didn't dare talk to him, so she touched the hem of his garment. "Daughter," says Jesus. Daughter. The first word Jesus says to her is one that restores her to a relationship. Daughter, not woman, which Jesus sometimes used, but daughter. Daughter, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. We don't know what happened to Jairus or to the woman. Legend has it that the woman paid for a statue to commemorate what Jesus had done, and she placed it on the patch of ground where she had been healed. But what about us? We may ourselves have once been cynical and dismissive of Jesus or of the church. There may have been a time when we felt ourselves to be unloved and unlovely, unliked and unlikable. We may have only been brave enough to hide behind pillars, thinking we might just touch the hem of his garment. But Jesus' love has reached us there, and he says to us, daughter, son, your faith has made you whole. Go in peace. And in turn, we become part of this extraordinary community that is the church. And some will be part of the church because they know that good deeds alone are not enough, and because even the seemingly good people may not always get it right. Others will be part of the church because they need to be loved first. They need to be loved before they can develop that sense of value that says that it's worth changing their ways. And others will be part of the church because they need the church to stop with them and to restore them to relationship, to love them back to wholeness. And as we rejoice in being this wonderful mixture of people, the religious, the good, the rich, the poor, and the slightly odd, then we can feel that we've begun to witness to the universal love of God, made real, made tangible in the ministry of Jesus Christ. Amen.